I'm not a fan of this. It doesn't sit well with me. I truly value her and the significance she holds for me, the show, the network, and the industry itself. Stephen A. Smith didn't simply respond to Molly Qerim's departure from ESPN. He boldly faced the network's executives, insisting they provide her with the respect and compensation she rightfully earned. However, what Stephen A. did went beyond just Molly. It revealed the harsh truth of how ESPN treats its on-air personalities. The reality of this behind-the-scenes conflict could be messier than anyone is willing to acknowledge. Consequently, Molly's sudden departure has taken ESPN by surprise. This is the narrative ESPN wished you would never discover. A tale of corporate conflicts, hubris, and one of the most intense confrontations in contemporary sports journalism. When Molly Qerim, the longtime face of ESPN's First Take, unexpectedly stepped away, viewers assumed it was just another exit in television. However, behind the curtain, Stephen A. Smith, the network's prominent figure, was not merely reacting to her departure. He was reportedly challenging ESPN's executives, insisting they honor Molly's contributions and compensate her fairly. What we discovered reveals a backdrop of turmoil, hypocrisy, and Stephen A. risking his own standing in the process. This situation transcends a single television personality. It revolves around the dynamics of authority within ESPN. As Stephen A. pointed out, Molly's departure wasn't characterized by a meticulously orchestrated farewell. There was no celebratory confetti. She missed out on the heartfelt send-off. She stepped out without delay. In the ruthless arena of television, such a departure often denotes a single truth. Something has gone terribly awry. Last night, she unexpectedly stepped down as the show's host. To claim that I'm deeply upset about it would be putting it mildly. Molly is my friend. Molly is my colleague. She's someone I've relied on repeatedly, just as she has turned to me. For the past decade, we've been teammates on the show. Often, certain situations arise that can feel quite awkward to witness. Now, this is where it gets even more surprising. As Stephen A. Smith, the individual earning $20 million annually from ESPN, began to make remarks that, let's be honest, seemed specifically directed at Molly. While he attempted to clarify and repeatedly stated he wasn't addressing Molly, he simultaneously engaged in tirades about value, leverage, and understanding one's worth. The very matters that Molly was allegedly contesting with ESPN. So let's be clear, Stephen A. was indeed referencing Molly, sending a clear signal not just to her, but to ESPN as well. As reports surfaced indicating that Molly had received a $2 million annual offer from ESPN's competing network, Stephen A. took to the airwaves to emphasize that one cannot simply ask for money without possessing leverage. It wasn't a mere coincidence. It was a calculated move to apply pressure. Let's face it, among the ranks of ESPN, Stephen A. holds a unique authority to challenge the owners. He's a key player, a lucrative asset, as their top-earning talent. If he advocates for Molly's rightful compensation, the owners will have no choice but to pay attention. Here's the twist. Rather than safeguarding Molly, rather than keeping her from the repercussions, he appeared to highlight her predicament even further. By announcing to countless viewers that she had stepped down suddenly, he essentially drew attention to the very scandal she wanted to keep under wraps. The specifics, honestly, are not for your ears. However, I can't claim to be privy to every aspect. There was a negotiation regarding a contract underway. ESPN clearly had no desire to let her go. Ultimately, she opted to leave the show right away, as evident from her Instagram story last night. To put it frankly, it was unexpected. I had no idea she was considering this path. Ultimately, she settled on her choice. Now, we must continue with the show. That declaration sparked a frenzy online. What was the reason? If it solely revolved around contracts, why would Molly step down so abruptly? Why not complete the year? Why not host a farewell performance? Journalists on YouTube began piecing together the clues, and the narrative only became more complicated. On one end, ESPN leaders were denying her requests, allegedly proposing an amount significantly lower than her perceived worth. Conversely, Stephen A. Smith, who previously boasted about advocating for others during contract talks, now seemingly contends that everyone answers to higher authority. So, was he genuinely advocating for Molly, or was he aligning with management? Insiders reveal that tensions arose between Stephen A. and Molly regarding contracts, influence, and the true power dynamics at play. This discord likely intensified when ESPN reportedly presented Molly with what many considered an insulting offer, especially in contrast to the more lucrative deals secured by colleagues like Malika Andrews and Mina Kimes. With Stephen A. earning $20 million, it's natural that any co-host would seek a substantially higher paycheck. Molly, who might have been earning between $2.20 to $3 million, could understandably be aiming for a figure closer to $10 million given Stephen A.'s earnings. A certain analyst crystallized it succinctly. That's the unspoken truth. Stephen A. looms large over ESPN's financials. His salary establishes the benchmark. If he's earning $20 million, naturally, his fellow hosts will seek higher compensation. However, ESPN is reluctant to meet those demands. This generates conflict. In Molly's situation, it might have led to her departure. Now, this is where the real reveal occurs. Stephen A. attempted to portray this as Molly's own choice, suggesting it was hers to narrate. However, consider the recurring theme. Only a few weeks back, he was boasting about assisting Shannon in her appearance. He had even been informed that this led to an ESPN agreement. He has openly supported others. So, why didn't he extend the same support to Molly? Was it due to being silenced by the owners? Or could it be that, at his core, he was hesitant to forfeit his own influence for her sake? This is what renders this narrative so thrilling. For the first time, the facade faltered. Stephen A., the monarch of sports broadcasting, found himself torn between allegiance to his partner and fealty to the ESPN empire that funds him. The outcome? Molly is gone. Stephen A. remains in the game. The leader continues to succeed. Yet, there's a surprising angle many overlook. By discussing Molly's departure as a matter of contracts on air, Stephen A. might have unintentionally revealed that he attempted to step in. Consider this carefully. When you casually claim that everyone reports to someone else and imply that you can't determine your value without support, what does that truly mean? It suggests you struggled and came up short. That's the aspect ESPN aimed to keep under wraps. After all, if Stephen A. Smith, their $20 million star, couldn't secure Molly Qerim the compensation she warranted. So, what does this reveal about the values of ESPN? It suggests that leadership prioritizes financial gains over safeguarding the individuals who contributed to their success. In this video, we'll dive deep. From Stephen A.'s strange remarks, to Molly receiving unexpected proposals from competitors, to the murmurs of disloyalty behind closed doors. As you investigate further, the truth becomes evident. Stephen A. Smith faced off against ESPN's executives, but in the end, only one emerged unscathed. The most startling truth of all is that this moment is still to unfold. When Molly Qerim departed from ESPN, it wasn't merely a resignation. It sparked a chain reaction that escalated into a tidal wave. Ironically, the individual who could have intervened, Stephen A. Smith, became the focal point of the ensuing backlash. Consider that. For more than 10 years, Molly occupied the central chair on First Take, acting as the referee, the guiding presence, and the cohesive force that prevented chaos from taking over the show. She gracefully handled Stephen A.'s fiery outbursts, soothed Max Kellerman during intense discussions, and fostered a space where personalities could truly shine. She was more than a moderator. She infused First Take with its unique pulse. When it was time to review her contract, ESPN made it clear they viewed her as easily replaceable. This isn't mere conjecture. Her sudden exit and the circumstances surrounding it imply as much. Had the situation been friendly, ESPN would have celebrated her departure with a special tribute, showcasing her best moments to capture audience interest. Instead, Molly vanished without warning. Her departure became public sooner than she intended. And what was Stephen A.'s response? He took to the airwaves and framed it as her issue. Yet, in negotiations, when engaging in discussions and dealing with feedback you might wish to avoid or emotions that may not be pleasant, it's essential to recognize your worth, even when others validate it. We exist in a reality that demands maturity. This goes beyond mere commentary. That's a speech, and fans got the message loud and clear. Stephen A. wasn't backing Molly. He was upholding ESPN's stance. Now let's analyze this. Stephen A. has crafted his reputation through candid frankness. He critiques athletes, coaches, and executives alike. No one is exempt. Yet with Molly, his attitude changed. He refrained from mentioning anyone specifically. He skirted the topic. His words were ambiguous, stating that everyone was accountable to someone. Why? Because, unbeknownst to many, Stephen A. had already taken the matter up with the higher-ups. Several analysts theorized that when ESPN offered Molly a meager salary, Stephen A. sought to use his influence to secure her a better deal. However, ESPN's leaders, Bob Iger, Jimmy Pitaro, and the higher-ups remained unmoved. They had already committed to a hefty $20 million contract for Stephen A. To them, Molly was an afterthought. She lacked the draw of big ratings. She wasn't the marquee star. She held the role of moderator. In the language of the corporate world, that implied she was replaceable. This left Stephen A. in a tough spot. He could either advocate more fiercely for Molly and jeopardize his own standing, or he could play it safe and adhere to corporate policies. Judging by his actions on screen, he opted for the latter route. Yet, this is where it becomes intimate. Molly transcended the role of a colleague. According to Stephen A., she was his collaborator, his confidant, his foundation. Molly is a companion. Molly is a colleague. Molly is a person I've turned to repeatedly over the years. Over the past decade, we've teamed up on a show just as she has supported me. Often, situations arise that are simply awkward to witness. If Molly truly meant so much to him, then why didn't he leverage his $20 million to ensure her future? It wasn't just fans who wondered about this. In various podcasts and YouTube discussions, critics took aim at Stephen A., alleging he prioritized his own brand over that of his co-host. One commentator succinctly pointed out that gaining clicks shouldn't come at the expense of the person who helped you build your platform. Nonetheless, Stephen A. remained unapologetic. He repeatedly claimed that Molly's narrative wasn't his to share. even as he divulged enough details to spark debate. This is quintessential Stephen A. He guards his interests while allowing the spectacle to dominate the news. However, beneath the surface, there's more to it. Molly's discontent extended beyond financial matters. It revolved around honor. Those familiar with her recounted that she found the discussions regarding the ESPN deal to be disrespectful. One account claims she was undervalued, while figures like Malika Andrews and Mina Kimes were reaping big rewards. Just think about the emotions that stirred. Molly dedicated a decade to transforming First Take into a formidable entity. She witnessed Max Kellerman's arrival and departure. She experienced numerous iconic debates that racked up views. She witnessed the upheaval at ESPN firsthand. But when it came time for her departure, the organization treated her as if she could easily be substituted. That goes beyond poor business judgment, is an insult. Then the real betrayal struck. Sources indicate that ESPN competitors quickly stepped up, presenting Molly with a lucrative multi-year contract totaling millions. Fox, Amazon, and even murmurs about Netflix's sports strategy emerged. Every network recognized Molly's worth, save for the one she had dedicated nearly 20 years to. Thus, her departure was swift. She didn't merely leave, she raced away. Remaining in her position would imply settling for reduced pay, diminished esteem, and being overshadowed by her co-host, who earned tenfold her income. This is where Stephen A.'s clash enters the narrative. Sources suggest he advocated for Molly, but only to a certain extent. He likely approached the management, highlighted her worth, and perhaps even warned them about the public perception of her departure. However, when they declined, he backed down. This is where Stephen A. diverges from a figure like Charles Barkley. Barkley has consistently accepted reduced salaries to maintain his inside the NBA ensemble. He recognizes that chemistry is key to success. In contrast, Stephen A. appears reluctant to forfeit any part of his wealth to preserve his group. Therefore, when Stephen A. claims, "We all answer someone," what he truly conveys is, "I made an attempt, but my superior declined, and I wouldn't jeopardize my $20 million contract for her." And therein lies the sadness of this entire story. We must remember that Molly was not eager for her exit to be public. She openly expressed her frustration about the news leaking prematurely. However, it was Stephen A. who announced to countless viewers that she had stepped down. Whether by design or not, he unintentionally became synonymous with her exit. And here lies the sharp twist of fate. The individual who previously championed loyalty and took pride in defending his teammates is now facing allegations of betraying a trusted ally. Was Stephen A. justified in looking out for his own interests? Or was ESPN so relentless that even he couldn't shield her? This argument is igniting discussions across the internet. Yet, it's clear that this narrative goes beyond just a clash between Molly and ESPN. This situation exemplifies how corporate America selects talent, prioritizing numbers over loyalty. Notably, Stephen A., usually the most vocal figure in sports, fell silent when it counted. This has led fans to label it as one of the greatest betrayals in ESPN's history. However, rest assured, this tale is far from over. The most astonishing aspect of the clash between Stephen A. and ESPN's executives remains untold. Once you catch wind of it, you'll see why Molly's departure could signal the dusk of ESPN's reign. A contract lacking respect. While Stephen A. enjoys the status of ESPN's top earner, he isn't an owner. When the conflict over Molly Qerim's contract escalated into a shocking resignation, Stephen A. found himself at a crossroads. Confront management or conform as a loyal employee. Based on our findings, he attempted to achieve both objectives. However, it exploded in his face. Let's take a step back to the days following Molly's departure. Executives at ESPN believed they could manage the issue discreetly, assuming Molly would simply move on. Stephen A. would carry on with his program, and the news would eventually die down. But that's not the way things unfolded. Instead, Stephen A. took to the airwaves and endlessly discussed contracts, leverage, and powers that be. This wasn't merely analysis. Was Stephen A. revealing his own clash with ESPN? He wasn't explicit about it. Instead, he was conveying a message to the audience. I stood up for Molly. However, ultimately, I'm not the one writing the checks. This is where the conflict became apparent, as viewers didn't perceive a man defending his partner. They witnessed a guy casting her aside. On YouTube, snippets of Stephen A.'s statements exploded online. Commentators branded his words strange and egocentric. Some charged him with attempting to portray Molly's departure as a personal misstep, not a corporate blunder. Others boldly claimed he was manipulating the viewers, suggesting she lacked gratitude for seeking more. Then the whispers began, fell drastically short of her expectations, even as competitors such as Fox and Amazon came forward with lucrative multi-million deals. One account suggested she was negotiating for a $2 million annual contract, which was substantially above ESPN's purportedly inadequate proposal. Consequently, when Stephen A. remarked live that we can't set our own worth, viewers perceived it as validation. ESPN underestimated Molly, and she responded. Rather than support her, Stephen A. chose to align with the management. Yet, the situation might have been more nuanced than it appeared. Sources claim that Stephen A. did challenge ESPN's higher-ups. He reportedly contended that Molly warranted greater recognition, highlighting her 10 years of dedication and her contributions in transforming First Take into a powerhouse. However, ESPN remained indifferent to his appeals. They saw moderators as replaceable. To illustrate this, they had alternatives ready to go. This placed Stephen A. in a tough position. If he pressed too much, he could alienate his superiors and endanger his $20 million yearly salary. If he opted for silence, it would make him appear hypocritical. His approach was to tread carefully, openly commend Molly, yet behind the scenes, nudge management, but always stopping short of jeopardizing his own standing. Consequently, disappointment reigned. Molly sensed a duality of loyalty. Fans believed Stephen A. had betrayed his principles. Meanwhile, ESPN brass felt he had unnecessarily ignited controversy by mentioning contracts at all. This is why Stephen A. got into damage control, expressing his admiration and gratitude for Molly while avoiding accountability. However, that did little to improve the perception. In fact, it intensified the issues, as Stephen A. acknowledged Molly's importance to the show, yet allowed her to leave. Fans quickly picked up on the inconsistency across forums, social media, and podcasts. The story turned quickly. Stephen A. was no longer the protagonist. He took on the role of the antagonist. YouTube pundits laid it out clearly. If she meant that much to you, a salary reduction would have been a small price to pay. You would have approached the table and declared, "Take $1 million from me and deliver it to Molly." That analogy hit hard. It underscored the selflessness that Charles Barkley and the inside the NBA team have demonstrated for years, prioritizing team solidarity over personal profit. In stark contrast, Stephen A. seemed intent on protecting his earnings at any price. And then the most unexpected turn unfolded. There are whispers that Molly's departure wasn't solely due to ESPN's disappointing offers. Some suggest she sought to distance herself from Stephen A. directly. Commentators have suggested that their discord went beyond monetary issues. One media source bluntly questioned whether Molly chose to exit ESPN to escape Stephen A. Smith. Although there's no concrete evidence of a personal rift, the timing certainly piqued interest. A few days ahead of Molly's departure, Stephen A. was publicly celebrating his efforts to secure Shannon Sharpe's contract. However, he didn't exhibit the same level of support for Molly, which may have come across as a betrayal to her. This is where the clash with ESPN's executives escalated dramatically. It was alleged that Stephen A. approached the bosses, insisting that Molly deserved a higher salary, leveraging his position as the network's leading star. The executive, however, dismissed him, stating plainly, "We already compensate you with $20 million. That's the destination of the funds." Others aligned accordingly. This is the harsh reality of corporate media. Regardless of your influence, there's always a superior directing the course. Stephen A. may be the most familiar figure at ESPN, yet it's Bob Iger and Jimmy Petero who wield the true authority. In the end, their stance was evident. Molly didn't merit the resources, and when Stephen A. returned to his broadcast, hinting that everyone has a higher authority, it was more than just an offhand remark. It was an admission. He had stepped into the boardroom, attempted to leverage his influence, and faced a setback. This is why this narrative holds significance. This situation transcends a mere TV host exiting a program. It underscores the moment when even ESPN's top talents understand the limits of their influence. The repercussions are still echoing. Molly's lucrative offers from competing networks showcase her worth. Meanwhile, Stephen A.'s image has suffered, revealing ESPN as an entity prioritizing profit over loyalty. However, the most surprising aspect of this whole situation lies in Stephen A.'s off-camera remarks, indicating that his discontent with ESPN's leadership might have hit a critical threshold. When those comments are revealed, they could completely alter our perception of Stephen A.'s ties with the network. The conflict with ESPN's executives and the repercussions of Molly Qerim's departure didn't merely rattle First Take. It sent ripples throughout the entire sports media world, leaving Stephen A. Smith to contend with inquiries he's never encountered prior. The reality is this: Stephen A. crafted his success by being unassailable. He commands the room, represents ESPN, and isn't shy about challenging athletes. Yet, when it was time to defend his co-host, whom he labeled his ally and friend, fans started to doubt. Was Stephen A. truly the devoted leader he portrayed, or merely another corporate figure prioritizing his contract over the well-being of others? Molly Swift's departure highlighted the contract's significance even more. Just days after she stepped down, rumors began circulating that competing networks like ESPN were eager to make her an offer. Fox, Amazon Prime, and even murmurs about Netflix diving into sports discussions were buzzing. The interest in her was palpable. What was the reason? Although ESPN viewed her as expendable, competing networks recognized her worth as an established on-air personality with a dedicated audience. Reports indicated she was in discussions for a $2 million annual contract, nearly twice the amount ESPN supposedly proposed during condescending negotiations. Her portrayal of ESPN has been quite unfavorable. To the audience, it appeared that the once leading sports talk network was losing talent, not due to voluntary departures, but because management wouldn't offer fair compensation. Stephen A's position is, at best, unclear. He has publicly lauded Molly, referring to her as one of the industry's finest and vital to the program. However, those compliments felt insincere, especially from someone capable of advocating more forcefully, yet opting not to. The juxtaposition with Charles Barkley's Inside the NBA crew was frequently mentioned. Viewers noted how Barkley and his team at TNT have consistently valued camaraderie over financial gain, even adjusting contract to maintain their cohesive group. At the same time, Stephen A., who boasts a $20 million contract, failed to support his co-host of a decade. Ironically, he had just been lauding his role in helping Shannon Sharpe land a deal with ESPN, taking pride in championing his peers. However, when it came to Molly's need for assistance, he pivoted to a corporate script about obligations to higher-ups. This was not merely a contradiction, it was a disloyalty. This is why supporters on online forums and YouTube started voicing what many were thinking. Perhaps Molly's departure wasn't solely about financial disputes. Perhaps it stemmed from her reluctance to align with someone who claimed partnership but chose to side with the executives when it counted. This theory gained momentum when sources indicated there was tension between Molly and Stephen A. during the last months. Whether that tension revolved around contracts, creative authority, or personal issues, the outcome remained unchanged. Molly left, leaving Stephen A. to justify himself to millions of skeptical viewers who were no longer convinced by his narrative. However, there's a surprising angle that ESPN has overlooked. Stephen A. didn't simply submit to the higher-ups behind closed doors. Allegedly, he entered those discussions ready to fight and ended up on the losing side. Just reflect on his passionate outbursts during broadcasts. What can I do to boost my boss's profits? How can I obtain it? Why do I mention this? Because each of us has responded to a certain someone. This wasn't merely a matter of philosophy. This was Stephen A. recognizing that he attempted to take a tough stance. Yet the executives at ESPN reminded him that, regardless of his stature, he remains accountable to them. This is precisely what renders this narrative so incendiary. Should ESPN have the audacity to reject their premier talent? What implications does that hold for others tethered by contract? It signifies that the foundation of ESPN is faltering. They're losing valuable personnel. Not only Molly, but numerous other hosts, analysts, and commentators who have departed in recent times. They're slashing pay, constraining expenditures, and wagering their future on a select few individuals. Yet, as they do so, they risk estranging the very creators of their identity. Audiences are catching on. Discussions have moved from, did Molly depart because of Stephen A., to is ESPN still viable? Competing networks are hovering like predators, gathering overlooked talent, while ESPN clings to a corporate model that favors profits over allegiance. Stephen A. finds himself in a tough spot. His credibility is compromised. The perception of him as a steadfast captain is marred. Despite his repeated claims that it had nothing to do with Molly, the audience is wise to the truth. They notice the gestures, tuned into the speeches, and piece together the puzzle. What does this mean for Molly? Curiously, it places her in a more advantageous spot than before. She's receiving proposals, investigating alternative platforms, and demonstrating that her influence exceeds the confines ESPN attempted to impose. On the other hand, for Stephen A., her exit serves as an enduring blemish. Regardless of his ongoing achievements, he'll forever be known as the host who allowed a decade-long partner to slip away. For ESPN, this controversy extends beyond just Molly. It's a wake-up call. If they're prepared to undervalue a talent like her, what's stopping the rest from seeking greener pastures? How soon will ESPN's stronghold begin to crumble beneath its own hubris? The unsettling truth is this. Stephen A.'s clash with management wasn't a triumph. It served as a wake-up call that even he, the emblem of the network, cannot alter ESPN's business practices. If he lacks the power to make changes, then no one can. This suggests that Molly's departure might not conclude this narrative. Instead, it could signal the start of ESPN's decline. And the most startling discovery? Reports indicate that Stephen A. departed those sessions with ESPN executives feeling more vexed than usual. Behind the scenes, he allegedly expressed to close friends a sense of unprecedented helplessness. If accurate, this marks a pivotal moment in his career where the master of the narrative confronts a situation beyond his vocal influence. Consider this. If Stephen A. is unable to safeguard Molly, what chance does he have for his own defense? And as ESPN's stronghold begins to falter, will he emerge as the sole survivor or be the next to exit? If you found this video entertaining, feel free to tap on any of the cards displayed on your screen for additional content.